Hello, and welcome to the Voices for Justice podcast, part of the Higher Endeavor Network's Equity and Racial Justice Learning Track. This podcast seeks to enhance equity mindedness through conversations addressing critical topics and highlighting asset-based narratives from practitioners in the field. I'm your host, Alyssa Silva, and we have a very special episode for you today. We will have a chance to hear from an incredible guest, Dr. J. Luke Wood, the 9th president of Sacramento State and a nationally renowned scholar on racial equity in education. Prior to his presidency, Dr. Wood served as vice president for student affairs and campus diversity and chief diversity officer at San Diego State University, where he was also named the first Black distinguished professor in the institution's history. A two-time alumnus of Sac State, Dr. Woods' leadership combines a commitment to student success, innovation, and courageous action, including the launch of the nation's first Black Honors College. In this conversation, we'll explore what it means to center equity and racial justice in difficult times. We'll talk about President Woods' approach to leading with courage, how he's advancing systemic change in higher education, and what keeps him grounded in this work, even amid challenges. I'll begin by sharing a brief bio about Dr. Wood, and then we'll dive right in. Dr. Luke Wood serves as the 9th president of Sacramento State, a nationally renowned scholar on racial equity in education. Prior to his presidency, Dr. Wood served as the vice president for student affairs and campus diversity and chief diversity officer at San Diego State University. While a faculty member at San Diego State, his expansive research and state policy work on student success and men of color led him to be named the first Black distinguished professor in the university's 125-year history. Under Dr. Wood's tenure, Sacramento State has advanced several notable efforts from its strategic plan. These efforts include the creation of the nation's first Black Honors College, which provides students with a specialized experience focused on Black history, life, and contributions. In partnership with UFC Hall of Famer Uriah Faber, Sacramento State has also launched the first ever university-backed collegiate pathway into boxing and mixed martial arts called Combat U. In addition to serving as president, Dr. Wood is a two-time alumnus of Sacramento State, where he earned his bachelor's degree in Black history and politics and a master's in higher education leadership. He holds an additional master's degree in early childhood education and a PhD in educational leadership and policy studies from Arizona State University. What do you think, Dr. Wood? Does that about sum it up?
I have to say, when I hear you read it all, I'm like, oh, wow, looks like I've been busy, but hopefully I live up to it all.
You have absolutely been busy. Yes, and we are so excited to have you on today. So, first and foremost, welcome. We're very excited to have you. You have been a very sought after guest here on the Voices for Justice podcast. So, we're thrilled to have you and get to pick your brain a little bit today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump right in. So, you're not only the president of Sacramento State, but you're also a two-time alumnus.
Yeah.
So, how has your personal journey through higher education shaped the way you lead the institution today, especially in this current moment of social and political uncertainty?
Well, that's a great question because um, I have to go back to the beginning of like, how did I get into this role? So when I was in high school, I was looking at colleges and ended up coming to Sacramento State for a number of different reasons. And so I got here in my freshman year of college, and I remember the moment that it really determined what I wanted to do for the future. There was an orientation, and they had everyone in this huge, large room, and they said this. Now, what I say it, a lot of people will recognize this statement. We're all sitting together, and when the person goes up on stage and they're trying to emphasize that, like, college is hard, you have to focus. And they said, look to your left, look to your right, only one of you will graduate. And they thought it was motivational, which it wasn't, right? But they used to say that all the time as a way of trying to convey that. But that was for me the first time I'd even thought of, like, you mean that people go to college but don't necessarily get a degree? And that kind of blew my mind because, like, in the community I came from, like, going to college in and of itself was the big deal, not like being there. I just assumed that everybody, if you made it to college, you're going to be fine. And then started finding out how, though, the differences in outcomes differed by racial group, and that our Black, our Southeast Asian, our Native American, our Latina students have outcomes that are lower than that of their peers. But I realized early on that it wasn't a function of students, their families, or their communities, but of an institution that was poorly designed to serve them, and in many ways was designed in some ways de facto with intention to not serve them. And so that's when I became really passionate about student success as a freshman in college. The very following year, I ran for student government with a team of folks who were all focused on student retention for minoritized students. And it was at that time that I began telling everyone boldly, loudly, I was going to be the president of Sacramento State. And so I am doing what was my life goal. I had the privilege of serving as the president of my alma mater. And I wanted to be in this role not because of the title, but because I wanted to be able to make sure that Sacramento State became an even more justice-centered organization that serves our most minoritized students. And that when everyone else does these performative statements of commitment to DEI and to student success, that we would be the example of, like, that's the authentic real group that's actually about it. And so part of being here has been about that work. And so when you ask how does that shape, it shapes everything. I'm here to make sure that every single student, no matter what community that they come from, that we have designed the organization to better serve them and to ensure that they have a greater likelihood of improving the lives for themselves and for their families.
Absolutely. And you've been a leading national voice on racial equity, and you were the first Black distinguished professor at San Diego State, as we've discussed. So, how did those academic and advocacy experiences inform your current leadership approach as a university president?
Well, I mean, all of it definitely informed my approach. But I would say that the two things that informed my approach as a campus president, I would say first was actually being in student government as a student. Um, I think people downplay how much it means to basically be a student leader who's essentially an administrator for, 3, 4 years, has the impact on how you think about organizations, but your understanding of higher ed. I learned more about being a president of Sacramento State as a student in student leadership than I did from any other experience that I had after that. I would say that the other things that influenced it, though, were certainly the research. As you mentioned in the bio, I write a lot. Um, I love to cogitate, ruminate, and then type it out. I like to tell people I was Chat GPT before there was Chat GPT because I could write a paper on anything if you give me a minute. Um, but it definitely, that influence on focusing on issues of race and organizational structure and how you create organizations that are designed to serve students. All that certainly influences the way that I think about being president of Sacramento State. And I will also say that, being president and also being a researcher of college leadership, like, not everything lines up one to one. The theories and the research, they give you a roadmap, but within that roadmap, there's a lot of small, dynamic, complex things that you'll have to face that were never really part of those conversations or thought of, that make those situations very unique. But I think that that background of being a scholar of higher education has certainly been beneficial for being in this role.
I can definitely see that. And you spoke a little bit about, how you write so much um and you're on a podcast right now, right? So in 2017, you spoke on the Fallen State podcast about how
Mhm.
how we need to quote eliminate whiteness, end quote.
Mhm.
in the context of our education system and about how your Black Minds Matter course has challenged so many in the field to think differently. This call to end whiteness can be both powerful and controversial, especially in higher education. So, I'm curious, how have you defined or rather redefined that phrase since 2017 in the context of institutional transformation? And how do you lead a university while continuing to push these conversations forward, particularly in environments that may not be ready or willing to hear them?
Yeah, I mean, so I was part of a podcast that we were talking about Black student success in education. And we were talking about how there are systemic inequities that are embedded within educational systems that create outcome disparities for students. And it was, so first of all, very important to know, it was a kind of ultra conservative show that I was expressing these opinions on. So the video itself was highly edited to begin with, and not so much to make it sound like I was saying something that I wasn't saying, but for time. Um, and so yeah, we were talking about concepts like racial microaggressions, critical race theory, whiteness, and we were talking about, and by the way, I've created none of these concepts, right? These are concepts that were created by other people. I'm merely reflecting on what they mean. And so we were talking about whiteness, and from the lens of a critical race theorist, whiteness is a constructed identity that was created to help to justify some of the incredible wrongs that have happened towards minoritized communities, and it's an element that's embedded within white culture that treats minoritized communities in disparaging ways. And so that's like, and there's lots of different academic definitions of whiteness, but and not a single one of those definitions is referring specifically to white people overall. It's referring to those elements within that culture that can, at sometimes, not sometimes, but like actually systemic, that can uh, foster these very difficult environments for students of color. So, um, so I said what I said. I stand by what I say. I didn't say anything that I regret. I think that my words have been taken out of context. It's also funny because I'm adopted by a white family. I'm half white, though I don't identify as white. I'm black. Um, I don't necessarily. So the some of the vitriol that came from some of the conservative folks out there, I think is just a huge misunderstanding about what we're actually talking about. But I'll also say that that is a common approach that's used by conservative groups, right? Think about all the pushback there was on critical race theory, all the pushback on ethnic studies, all the pushback on microaggressions, and even the use of the term microaggressions. And you've even seen states create laws to ban these concepts. It's pretty crazy when you have a state that's creating the law to ban an idea in a country that's supposed to be based upon us embracing people from different backgrounds and different cultures to create this quote unquote melting pot, which we know doesn't really exist. So I do think that the words were taken out of context, but the conversation, everything that I said, I agree to this day. I don't feel any differently, and I want to create an environment for every single one of my students, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're from the Latinx community. They know that I care about them and that we're creating an organization that serves them. And honestly, I think if you talk to our students here, they know that and they do. It's certainly been an interesting week seeing some of that feedback that's come through from that. But you know, I am a critical race theorist who happens to be a president. So there are going to be times when I talk about concepts that are theoretical, and I'm going to be comfortable saying what needs to be said for the community.
I'm happy to hear that you are willing to be a voice for the community, as you've said, and you don't regret what you said. You're standing on business, and what you said is what
Yeah.
you said, and that's how it should be. So that's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
But I want to jump to talking about your during your tenure, you launched, or Sacramento State launched, the country's first Black Honors College.
Yes.
Yeah, so what compelled you to prioritize this initiative, and how do you see it reshaping the institutional landscape for Black students and scholars?
So what led us to do this was really a focus on wanting to better serve Black students at Sacramento State. So some important context. Sacramento State has the largest population of Black students in California. So out of all the public four-year colleges and universities, whether it's the Cal State system, the UC system, no one serves more Black students than we do. So we are the Black serving institution in the state. And in fact, we've been recognized by our own legislative assembly, that the California State Assembly has recognized Sacramento State as a Black serving institution. We're the only one in the state of California that's currently recognized. And so we had this large population, we had this designation, we had this historical focus, but when you would look at our outcomes, those outcomes didn't match it. You know, we were in the bottom third in terms of success. And when I came back to Sacramento State, one of the things I was most passionate about doing was making sure that we're truly supporting our Black and African American students. And so we thought about, should we take an existing program and elevate it and expand it? Should we partner with an HBCU and have some sort of exchange or some sort of program like that? And we've explored a lot of things, and a lot of things we are doing. But what we came down to is we need to have full control over an educational experience. Because if you believe in systems, right? W. Edward Deming and Paul Batalden say that every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results that it gets. So the fact that we had the largest population and we're in the bottom third with outcomes is not a function of happenstance. It's a function of the system here at the campus that was perfectly designed for these results. So what we decided to do with the Black Honors College was to say, let's create something at Sacramento State that's outside our normal systems, a new system. And that's what this represents. So the students in a Black Honors College, they have their own space. They have their own faculty. They have their own staff. They have their own dean of students. They have their own floor in the residence halls. They have their own closed-in experience. And so we started with 80 students in last fall. We did another 80 students in the spring. And this fall, we'll be at 450 students. On our way to our goal by 27 is to have over 1,000 students in the Black Honors College. So it's been growing just incredibly. There is an incredible desire for students to be able to have a Black-centric experience in California. And here's why that is. For a lot of students, if you want to have a go to an institution that has a mission focus or some sort of designation around serving Black students, that doesn't happen in California unless you're a graduate student, the one option being Charles Drew. So everyone in California, basically, what you see is that they look at the HBCUs or they look at the predominantly Black institutions, both of which are in the same states, I should say. So the Midwestern United States, the Western United States, despite having the population of Black students that we have, there's not a single institution that's an HBCU. There's not a single institution that's a PBI. And so we are trying to chart a new course. We'll never be an HBCU, but you know what we will be? We will be the bombest Black serving institution from Sac State to Black State. We will create an environment where we welcome students, and we also create an ecosystem around them. So we've got the Black Honors College that we're doing. We started a new drum line. We've got a majorette team. We've got a Divine Nine Square and the main quad. We've got a Black serving institution steering committee that puts on events for the entire campus. We have been unapologetic in making sure that we are communicating to our Black student community that they matter. And we're not just doing it for our Black students. We're doing it across the board for our minoritized student communities. So while you see all these institutions moving away from DEI, what you see us doing here is we're leaning in. And I actually think that the time that we're in right now, and this might be a slightly controversial to say, but I again, I stand on business like you said, Alyssa.
Oh no, don't hold on. This is gonna get taken out of context.
It could get taken out of context.
No.
I think that what's happening right now with the presidential administration and the pushback on DEI is actually not a bad thing. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Of course, it's a bad thing in terms of how it's impacting people. Of course, it's a bad thing in terms of implications for money and resources and climate and all those things. But it's also separating the wheat from the chaff. You got institutions that have been performative. How many colleges and universities did we see come out after George Floyd and release statements? We stand with the Black community. We want to create an environment where everyone feels like they are welcome here. We reject anti-Blackness in all its forms. And half of those institutions are the same ones that were the first ones to get rid of all their DEI stuff when this came out. So I think it's a good thing, because then the institutions like Sac State that want to serve as a light in the current darkness, it becomes more clear to our minoritized students where you should go. Because the truth is, not every minoritized student should look at every college and university and think it's a good place for them to be. You got to look at the places that are actually leaning in. Sacramento State, we're a Hispanic serving institution. We're Asian American, Native Americans, Pacific Islander serving institution. We're a state recognized Black serving institution. We got the largest population of Native American students in the Cal State system. We have bold enrollment goals around foster youth and students who've been formerly incarcerated. And that's our DNA. That's our identity. That's what we stand by. And so when all the other places are, putting students on their brochures and then their websites, but at the same time erasing them from the curriculum, I tell those students, don't go there where there are going to be people who are performative. Come to Sacramento State. Well, you won't just be a number on a sheet, but you'll be a person, a community in the future. And so that's the promise that we bring. So we branded ourselves. We are the North Star of the West, and the Black Honors College is one of the ways in which we're doing that. And we're seeing the results already. In 2 years, we went from 1,939 Black students to over 2,500 Black students in 2 years who came to Sacramento State. And everything we're doing is in alignment with federal law. Every single thing we do is open to everybody. We have non-Black students in the Black Honors College. They're more than welcome. We always love allies, right? We need allies. We need them in the room. We have non-Black faculty in the Black Honors College, people who care about Black studies within their disciplines. But those are the kind of thinking and sense making that we think is needed right now. Last thing I'll say in the Black Honors College is the students who come in as transfer students, which I want to make sure we're truly serving transfer students. They have a choice in 3 minors. They can get a minor through the Black Honors College in real estate and land use development. They could get a minor in healthcare and aging, or they can get a minor in artificial intelligence management. We picked those 3 areas because what they represent are job areas that we know when students graduate, there's gainful employment waiting right for them. And for a lot of our students, what they really want is they want to be able to elevate their families, elevate their communities, and ultimately that requires them to have jobs that pay well. And so we're leaning into making sure that that experience is there for them.
That's awesome. You guys are doing incredible work over there. And I just have to say, I'm really glad that you said that quiet part out loud because it's true. Like a lot of this wouldn't have come to light if there wasn't this like pushback to eliminate DEI. And we're seeing a lot of people that were once very performative and, all about it. Now they're showing their true colors. So in a
Yeah.
way, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that it's happening and you can see people for who they truly are.
Yeah.
And so you guys are doing this incredible work. So, but you're doing this in this very hard, politically charged time. So,
Yeah.
what internal strategies do you use to stay grounded and focused when the external environment becomes hostile or divisive?
You mean for us as a campus or for me personally?
Both.
Hmm. So for us as a campus, it's really been around community building. So one of the things I love about Sacramento State, and I'll rep Sac State. I mean, I'm an alum from here, and I get to be the president. So like, I'm gonna be Sac State all day. But what's really cool about it is that it's really a community. The faculty members here, and I've worked at a lot of universities, but there's something special here about the way that the people here care. Like, yes, we're a research 2 institution, but the number one thing that we care about is student learning and mentoring students. And I think that that's a different kind of model than a lot of universities that are large public universities are using this day. And so, proud of that. But that community building is how we kind of try to bring people together during this tough time. So we have a lot of different events that we put on campus. We've got what we call pop-up events for the students where we bring in a Latin artist who's going to do some really awesome performance, or someone from the APITA community, and we, or DJs, and we do a lot of events like that to try to make it as enjoyable as we can outside the classroom. We use athletics as a way to build community and bring people together because our athletic programs have been growing and positive. Um, I would just say that what we do is we have a lot of campus events that are meant to bring people together and community and conversation. And I last year it wasn't an uncommon day for me to go and sit in a room with folks on a focus group where people are crying and being very emotive about the challenges that we're facing, and then the later in the day find us all in the center of the quad dancing to music, right? So there's that balance that we try to strike here. For me personally, um, my I have, a lot of different outlets that I try to do. I have, well, first of all, my family, my wife and kids is an important outlet for me. You can actually behind me is it's interesting. So this shelf actually represents like different aspects of who I am. So you've got, the ukulele up there. I play guitar and piano. You will see me every single day on the piano downstairs playing, and oftentimes the students who are part of our foster youth program coming by and singing with me on the piano. I'm part of a fraternity. I participate in boxing, and what I mean by that is I train like I'm taking a fight, even though I can't really take a fight right now as president. But I did some amateur boxing right before I took this role, and so I went, for example, I'm back from the gym this morning where I got a really hard workout in. So, and I think that's important. So, and I'm going to go theoretical here for a quick minute, but I'm a professor, so you got to bear with me here. So, William Smith's work, right, from the University of Utah on racial battle fatigue, I would say if there was a theoretical framework that guided my leadership as president of the campus, that would be the theoretical framework, right? And so racial battle fatigue basically is called that because what they find is that when you're in an environment with persistent racial stress and racial strain, that the outcomes that come from that are very similar to combat stress syndrome. They find that like in environments where there's like persistent microaggressions taking place, it impacts the students in three different ways: cognitively, their ability to process information, to retain information, their focus in the classroom. It affects them psychologically, constant anxiety and worrying, anger suppression, resentment, emotional and social withdrawal. But most importantly, at least in my perspective, it impacts them physically, tension headaches, backaches, elevated heartbeat, upset stomach, extreme fatigue, inability to sleep at night. And so the reason that I'm really big on combat sports like boxing or anything that is a high intensity activity is I think that the one of the few ways that I think that you can counterbalance the negative impact of doing racialized work in a time that it's very difficult is to have those kinds of high intensity outlets like boxing or whatever else that folks are doing. I think that if you're, I would say this, if you're an administrator or a faculty member right now in higher ed, the number one thing you could do is grab some boxing gloves, right? Because when goes to crap, there's nothing that feels better than banging on a bag and then go back to the work and doing good work for the people.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your creative outlets for keeping you grounded because like I said, we're in tough times and
Yeah.
you know, a lot of institutions are facing pressures to pull back on DI work as we were speaking about earlier. So, I want to give you a chance to speak directly to your fellow university presidents or any leaders in this space who might be afraid to take bold action right now. What would you say to them? What is your message? What is your advice?
My advice is you have to stick to your value system. Um, there's a lot of times when I'm faced with different decisions. I could go left, I could go right, but what I try to do is to basically say, for me, what would Luke, when I was 19 years old, wanting to be in this role, what would I have thought about that? Now, that doesn't mean that I was right when I was 19. So sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But It's about making sure that you're still grounded in that value system that brought you there. And so I think that my first point of recommendation is you got to do that gut check. The second thing is I think it's okay to be afraid. I've had to adjust the way that I think about being president of Sac State. It when I first came here, my mind was, oh, what am I going to do 5 years from now? How are we going to do this? What am I going to do 10 years? Because I plan to be here for a long time. To really having a focus on, if I were gone tomorrow, what would I wish I would have done, solidified, institutionalized, so that if I wasn't here, that work would still carry on. You got to have that mentality right now. Um, and that's a harder thing to say to folks who may want to be a career president. For me, it was never about being a career president or going to a bunch of different places. It was really about being here at Sac State. So I'm doing what it is that I set out to do, but I also recognize that I'll never want to make a decision that keeps me in this role but sacrifices my values. So that's what I would say.
I think that's great advice. And I also want to ask, how do you think institutional leaders could collaborate more effectively with students and faculty and community partners to push more meaningful work and systemic change for the future?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing you got to do is you got to engage, right? And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. It is not uncommon for people to have a protest on their campus and for administrators to react this viscerally or negatively to that. I was a student activist here at Sacramento State. There is nothing I love more than student activism. And I go out, I mean, last year there was a protest and it was about me. And I went out there with the protesters. I'm like, hey, listen, I said, I'm just happy you're protesting. I said, it doesn't matter that it's about me or the decision I made. But by the way, you're misunderstanding that decision. But that's not the point. I'm glad that you feel comfortable and that you can basically do this. So you gotta create that environment where people feel like they can give you a list of demands or they can protest on campus, whether it's about the university. What I'm seeing is most of the protests these past couple of years, it's been less about the university and more about the world, right? More about injustice across the world, more about injustice in our community, more about what's happening with the presidential administration, more about policy. And I've seen that, and I think that's healthy. We're in a college, we're in a university, we're supposed to have diversity of thought. We should be able to embrace that. So that's one thing that I tell students, and I mean it when I say it. I love student activism, and I just hope I want them to know that I, even when it's about me, I still am rooting for them when they're engaged in it, as long as they're making smart decisions, right? We were able to, for example, during the was it when all the encampments were taking place, we had an encampment at Sacramento State. Our encampment was different than most of the other encampments because we engaged the students. We were there every day with them. We were speaking with them the entire time. We were talking about what we're doing as a campus. I didn't send some other administrator to go have a conversation with our students. I did it myself, right? That's what you're supposed to do when you're the president, is be out there and be engaged with your student leaders and understand their passions, because you know what? That passion, like, that's what I want from one of our graduates. I want them to be so passionate that they're willing to say, I'm not even going to sleep in my own bed in order to make a world that's better for somebody else. Even if the strategy to get there is not always the right or perfect way, even if some of the thought process about some of the issues are more complex, none of that matters. It's about the fact that they saw something that they didn't like in the world and they set out to make it better. Like, that's what I want for a Sac State alum, no matter what the issue is, right? And so, but I think that involves, for those other presidents, being engaged in those conversations with your campus community, not delegating it to someone else, and embracing the ambiguity, as my colleague Marilee Bresciani would say. You got to be comfortable with ambiguity.
That says so much about your leadership skills and your role as the president, because I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I haven't spoken to many campus presidents, but I feel like they might not say that. I feel like a lot of students that are in school these days are scared to protest or scared to speak up and use their voice, but that's how change is made. And so it's very refreshing to hear you say that you're empowering your students and you're out there with them when they're protesting. Like, that's awesome.
All right, I got to tell you a little side on that one because
Yeah.
I think you'll appreciate this anecdote. So when I applied for this role, um I had one screening interview and then three actual interviews for this position. But I had been wanting to be able to take on this opportunity since I was 19 years old, right? And have worked my entire career to get to be in this moment where I'm leading Sacramento State. Um, so the last campaign as a student that I was involved with, we had this list of demands that we had given the president and all these requests that we had for things that we wanted to see done that were real legitimate issues, many of which were still issues when I got here. And what I wanted to do was make sure that no matter how far I got in my career, that I never forgot what it was like to be and think like 19-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old Luke. And so I took that list of demands, I printed it up. It took me a long time to find it. I printed it up, I folded it, and I put it in my front coat pocket as like not just symbolically, obviously it's over my heart, so there's some symbolism there, but to remind myself of who I really am. And so, I embrace the activism because it's the activism that brought me here. And it's that value system that will see us through these dark times.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to continue to talk about your vision um, for what comes next. So, we've talked about initiatives like Combat U and the Black Honors College. Um, it's kind of, these things show how we can better serve students as an institution. So, what are some key indicators that you look for to let you know that something that's equity centered is working?
Yeah, I think one of the things I look for is obviously graduation rates, but graduation rates are like a longer term outcome. So I'm much more interested in like course success rates, course retention rates, year to year retention. So we do spend a lot of time. I'm a researcher, so I spend a lot of time looking at our data. I would say that that's one set of markers. I think the other set of markers is just like is some of the more anecdotal, like what's the word on the street, right? The word on the street at Sacramento State is like this is a great place to be. Like that's the word on the street. And I do think that the narrative within the larger community about the campus matters. And right now, we're on a trajectory where people are excited about what's happening at Sacramento State. So get just a couple quick examples. Like our enrollment, like when everyone else in Northern California is struggling with enrollment, we just welcomed our largest incoming class ever. We just had our highest graduation rate in the university's history. We just became a research two university. All these things in the same year. We just launched Combat U, which is a program that, well, as you mentioned earlier, with Uriah Faber, which is a collegiate pathway into professional boxing and mixed martial arts. And in less than a year, have more athletes in Combat U than in all of our 21 intercollegiate athletic programs combined. We've got new like recruits that we have for basketball. Mike Bibby is our coach for basketball. Shaquille O'Neal is our general manager for basketball. We've got amazing players. Our football program had the best recruiting class in the country, not in Northern California, not in the country. So when you start like putting it all together, we face a lot of challenge, but there's also a lot of good happening too. And that's what kind of makes up that word on the street. And so when you go around this community, the alums are proud, they're excited because we're moving in the right direction and we're moving in a way that other universities aren't moving right now. And there's a lot of reasons for it. We've got amazing leadership here at Sacramento State. We've got great and amazing faculty. But I would actually say that the best thing that we have going is we have the best students on planet Earth. Fight me on that one. Like literally, Sac State students are like our demographic, low income, first generation, students of color, students who didn't have everything handed to them. And they love this idea of being at a place that helps them to box above their weight class, right? And to basically be able to go and create something special in the community. They're very community focused, they're very family focused. So I just love the value system of the students that we have. And so it makes it a joy. So the best part of my job is not actually sitting in this office. The best part of my job is every single day I make it a point to walk on campus. I try to take as much time as I can and I just talk to students. Like, what could be better than talking with a student and understanding what brought them here? And hey, maybe there's something I know about a policy or practice that can help them succeed. But we're trying to create that kind of environment and that ethos. And I think it's working.
We've talked a lot about your work on campus and your previous work. I want to shift to your work at home. You know, you said your family is a big part of your life and a big part of who you are.
Yep.
And you're raising children in this world with another scholar activist, your wife. I
Yes.
want to give you a chance to speak on that as well, because I'm sure you have so much to say about that. But my question is, what gives you hope about the future of higher education and the students that we serve, and how does everything that you do, how do your kids fit into that as well?
Yeah. So I'll first start out with what gives me hope. What gives me hope actually is our students. Uh, we have students who I find are very knowledgeable about the issues that face our world. They're very passionate about addressing those issues. They have not always come from means, but they've been committed to means to make it better for everyone else. And so it's a very community focused group of students that we have here. And so, whenever you watch the TV and you start getting down, like I could tell everyone just shut off the TV and come walk around and talk to students at Sac State, and then you'll be like, okay, the world's not going to hell in a handbasket, right? And then how that relates to my kids, when you're a president and you have young kids, your kids are part of the presidency. And so my kids are growing up at Sacramento State. Um, and and it's kind of funny because, I met their mom at Sacramento State, so I guess it only makes sense that she's my college sweetheart. So it only makes sense that they would be here a lot. So I have three children, 9, 14, and 16, Ariel, Luke, and Mayan. And they give me a lot of balance. They are just a lot of fun. And I'm also raising kids, so there's other challenges that go along with that too, in terms of wanting to be able to be there more, and also having a job and a role that is highly demanding. So I would say that I don't perfectly balance everything right on any side, on any topic, on any issue, but I'm giving it 1,000%. Now my wife, I met her here at Sacramento State, October 27th, I believe it was, 2003. So I was in the University Union and I saw her sitting with a friend. I was sitting by herself and I was sitting with a friend myself eating. And we both saw her at the same time. And between the two of us, we put on all the Black student events. So the fact that we saw her and we didn't know who she was, that was striking. And so I said to him, "Hey man, do you know who she is?" And he said, "No." He said, "Do you know who she is?" And I said, "No, I don't know who she is, but I'm going to marry that girl." And so I walked over to her. I introduced myself. I walked her to class, and we've been together ever since. And she's also my research partner. So we've got a ton of articles together, all focused on racial microaggressions, critical race theory, race sliding, primarily on Black children, but other minoritized children in early childhood education. So bridging our two academic disciplines into one to help focus and shed light on some pervasive issues. And we've also worked together even on some policy initiatives. We had a bill that we sponsored that was passed through California and is now state law, that basically makes it so that if you're a foster youth, they can't just suspend you. If they're going to go to do a suspension, they have to talk to your court-appointed attorney or social worker first. Because what we were finding, what was happening in our data, is a lot of these young kids were coming into these classrooms, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and then they were being used by the teachers as an example of what not to be, how not to act, and how not to learn. So when you have a teacher who has poor classroom management skills, they pick out this one kid that they can use as essentially don't be like them in order to manage the rest of the class without realizing they're doing significant damage. And we found that overwhelmingly, Black students, Latino males, foster youth are these students who are basically being used in this way. And it's unacceptable. And so we got a state law passed that says you can't just suspend these kids like that anymore. The social worker has to be involved because if it was a child who's not in foster care, you call home. But a child in foster care, you call home. What is home? Is home a group home? Is home a temporary placement? Is home a long-term placement? The only person that's consistent is their social worker and their court-appointed attorney. That's the person that needs to be in that mix. And I came to want to do that because I'm a former foster child myself. And so I wanted to make sure that my brothers and sisters had a better experience than I did. When I was in fifth grade, I was suspended 42 times by the same teacher. That's how I got into wanting to do equity work, was not because things went well, but because things went bad. But I also then was privileged to then have educators who cared about me, who invested in me, and who wanted to see me succeed and were rooting for me to succeed, not to fail. And so being blessed with both of those challenging experiences, but also the good ones, gives me essentially the roadmap of like what Sacramento State needs to do in order for us to make sure that when students come here having experienced damage across K-12 and community colleges, that they come into an environment that's safer and healthier and rejuvenating.
I noticed when you were speaking that there seems to be a pattern with you where
Okay.
you say something and you go do it and it happens. Like you said, I'm gonna be Sacramento State president and it happened. I'm gonna marry that girl and it happened. Is there a
Yeah.
secret to that? What's your is there what's going on there?
I never thought about it, but that's kind of how I operate in general. I never
Yeah.
thought about that. That's a very interesting observation. Um, I think what it is I believe in myself. But I don't believe in myself because of me. I believe in myself because the people who mentored me. I believe in myself because, even going further from a religious perspective, because the God who made me, I feel confident in who I am. And I grew up with enough mediocre people. I've engaged enough mediocre people throughout my life to know that like when I hear a student say to me that they experience and this is gonna be an interesting one to hear, but a lot of people talk about how they have imposter syndrome. I'm going to tell you that I've actually never had imposter syndrome. I've always said to myself, well, shoot, if that person can do it, I know I can, right? And maybe it's I think it's confidence. I don't think it's more than that. But I think that you have to start to believe that you can do something. And so you heard me say I'm going to marry that woman, right? And that happened. That I'm going to be president of Sacramento State. Next thing you'll hear me say is Sacramento State will become the flagship university in California.
I'm so glad that you said that because that was my next question. I was like, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next,
What I
Tom?
want to say is join us now or watch us win.
Awesome. Well, as we come to a close, I want to just first finally ask for student activists and early career professionals who might be listening to this right now, what is your final piece of advice that you would give them about sustaining your energy and vision for justice in higher ed spaces?
I would tell them do not give up, believe in yourself. This too shall pass, and to find the beauty in the difficult moments. I feel like I've learned more from the losses than the wins. I've gained more from being ostracized than being celebrated. And so Just know that if you're committed to a life of justice, it's a hard life. It's the life I committed myself to. It's a hard life, but I wouldn't change it for anything. And so if you stick to those values throughout your career, you'll be just fine. Just like I put that list of demands and held it throughout all my interviews and my front coat pocket. Write something to yourself now so that when you're in those very difficult times in the future, trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why did I say that I wanted to be part of this? That you can remind yourself of who you really are and whose you really are.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you once again for your time, for sharing your expertise, your advice. We really, truly appreciate it. I know the people at home watching will gain a lot from this conversation. So thank you again.
Appreciate it. And thank you for the time. And I hope everyone has a blessed rest of their day.
Be sure to catch future episodes of the Voices for Justice podcast as we continue to highlight powerful stories and important discussions around equity and justice. I'm Alyssa Silva, and we'll see you next time.